Meanwhile, as President Trump gets ready to meet with Vladimir Putin in 10 days, the president also lashed out at his critics who say he is being manipulated by Putin.
They're going, will President Trump be prepared? You know, President Putin is KGB and this and that. You know what? Putin's fine. He's fine. We're all fine with people. Will I be prepared? Totally prepared. I've been preparing for this stuff my whole life.
Joining me now, Ambassador Michael McFaul, the former ambassador to Russia and an NBC News international affairs analyst, the author of the new book, From Cold War to Hot Peace, an American ambassador in Putin's Russia, and retired four-star Army General Barry McCaffrey, a former JSC arms control negotiator for nuclear, chemical, and bioweapons. Welcome both. Well, first of all, Mike McFaul, is he prepared for Vladimir Putin?
Not to my knowledge. It doesn't seem like he prepares for these meetings. There's no evidence of that whatsoever. The way he talks about our bilateral relationship suggests that he's not prepared. When he floats out there while traveling on Air Force One, that he might look into Crimea as being the annexed Crimea, annexed by Putin in 2014, stolen from the Ukrainians, just to be clear. And he says, well, maybe I'll look into recognizing that as part of Russia. That means he's not reading his briefing papers. I can't imagine any senior U.S. government official that I know, and I know many of them, that work in the Trump administration, that would recommend he say such a thing. Same with bringing them into the G7. Same with, looking into whether we should reduce our troops in Germany. All of these are signals of concessions and nothing in return. He beats up on our allies. He makes demands of them, and yet with people like Putin, he doesn't seem to be asking for anything other than a good meeting.
Now, I want to talk to both of you about North Korea as well, but let's expand this and follow up on what you just said about NATO, because last night the president was just going after Angela Merkel and our NATO allies, General, and you and I both went through the whole period of those arms control talks back during the Reagan years, in fact, when you were probably a young officer, but I was a White House correspondent, and we've seen the evolution here. And what both Reagan and Herbert Walker Bush accomplished with one arms control treaty after another, finally, once Reagan got started. And now a lot of this is at stake. Putin's already violating the INF, the Intermediate Range Missile Agreement for Europe. Let me play a little bit more of the president talking last night about NATO and Angela Merkel.
I'll see NATO, and I'm going to tell NATO, you got to start paying your bills. The United States is not going to take care of everything. They kill us with NATO. They kill us. Germany pays 1%. 1%. And I said, you know, Angela, I can't guarantee it, but we're protecting you, and it means a lot more to you than protecting us, because I don't know how much protection we get by protecting you. So they want to protect against Russia, yet they pay billions of dollars to Russia, and we're the schmucks that are paying for the whole thing. So then, and by the way, I have to say this. Since I came, which is a year and a half, almost $33 billion more is projected to be paid by those NATO nations. But it's not enough. Do they ever tell you that? No. No.
General McCaffrey, your reaction when you see that?
Well, I think probably the most frightening aspect is the roar of the crowd acknowledging these observations. Look, you know, a lot's been lost already. I just had the privilege of listening to Ambassador McFaul in a small group lecture. One thing we got to sort of put as a data point, the Russians are simply magnificent people. You know, physics, mathematics, ballet, literature, courage of their soldiers are superb people. They're being the first victims of Putin and his kleptocracy, the former KGB guys. The place is impoverished. It's a tiny economy compared to the United States, never mind Western Europe and the United States. They don't have much strategic military power. All they've got is a bunch of nuclear weapons and oil and gas. So Putin has isolated them. He's frightened his neighbors. And for the President of the United States do not understand the power of our defense and economic relationships with Europe and NATO, the European Union, is simply preposterous.
And the language that he uses to describe this policy or lack of policy. Ambassador McFaul, what are the risks of his going one-on-one with Vladimir Putin, especially after we saw that scandalous, I think, only Republican bunch of senators going to Moscow and playing up to Foreign Minister Lai? Any Democrats with them, no one from Foreign Relations, no senior people from the defense committees, appropriators who don't know foreign policy, trumpeting the president's policy of make nice to Putin.
Well, first, Andrea, on NATO, it's an example of what we were just talking about earlier. He hasn't done his homework. He doesn't understand what the NATO alliance is about. He has this notion that they need to pay their dues to something. That's not what it's about. It's about their own defense spending. And when he says they've done nothing for us, that offends me as an American, because we were attacked on September 11th. Germany wasn't attacked on September 11th, and yet they sent their soldiers to fight alongside our soldiers in Afghanistan. And if I'm not mistaken, 54 Germans were killed in Afghanistan fighting for us. So he just doesn't understand the nature of the alliance. He also doesn't understand peace through strength. He should study up on Ronald Reagan. By being strong in Europe, we avoid war in a place in the 20th century that had these disastrous wars. That's also in America's interest. And therefore, when he rolls into that meeting with Putin, I just worry he doesn't understand basic facts about American national security, and he personalizes our diplomacy about him and his, his good chemistry with Kim Jong-un and maybe with President Putin. This is about American national interest. He was hired to defend us and advance our interests, not just for him to have a good meeting with Putin.
And General, back to North Korea, where there is likely going to be a meeting between Secretary Pompeo and Kim Jong-un. What are your concerns about that, given the fact that North Korea is yet to deliver on the promises of Singapore?
Well, look, I remain hopeful that Secretary Pompeo is a very astute fellow, very experienced, has longer-term ambitions, won't want to look like an idiot in the longer term. Having said that, Andrea, I've done a lot of arms control negotiations. Step number one is a full declaration of your nuclear program, followed by a willingness to allow verification. If he doesn't get that, nothing else matters. Whether or not, they'll eventually denuclearize in a year, I think is laughable. But step number one is, can you get a full declaration and the agreement to verification? So the president to come home and say, look, the problem's over. You can sleep well at night. The nuclear threat is gone. I cannot understand what is going on in his mind to make that kind of laughable statement.
And General, before we let you go, your reaction to the fact that apparently the Pentagon is canceling contracts and dismissing soldiers, immigrant soldiers who've signed up because of the path to citizenship and who, according to everything that I've ever been told, have been exemplary soldiers.
Well, we need to get some good reporting on it. I don't understand what's going on. Clearly, I was a company commander in Vietnam. We actually drafted foreign students who were here in the United States and sent them off to fight in my company, and they were great soldiers. In every war we've ever fought, we've had immigrants, and it's a great path to citizenship. My Pakistani driver, green card holder, I helped get one son in the Air Force and another in the Navy. So I can't understand what's going on. I'll bet this is not supported by the Department of Defense in any way.
No, I can imagine it's not. I remember talking to Leon Panetta about how great these soldiers were, and I've been to a naturalization ceremony in Baghdad with Joe Biden when they were swearing in troops.
Very moving.
And
very
it was
moving.
very moving. And that was